Welcome to the podcast. It's a Tuesday. I am Chris Graham, joined by Scott German, and we are going to talk some UVA sports and lots of other things, I suppose. Scott, we were chatting right before we hit record about Virginia baseball season comes to an end, and what that means is, hey, the 2021-2022 academic sports year has come to an end. No more UVA sports until, it's not too far off in the future, a couple months until football season starts. But we can probably wrap up some UVA loose ends as far as the season goes. But, yeah, what a disappointing end for baseball. It seemed like after the win Friday night in the opener of the Greenville Regional over Coastal Carolina, pretty good team. Virginia played well against ECU, a team that hadn't lost in a long time. Fell short in that one, got a 6-0 lead into game 3. The losers bracket game against Coastal couldn't hold on to that lead. You know, Scott, just a disappointing end to a season that started with so much promise.
It did, but, Chris, we had this discussion between two of us. I don't know if we had it in a podcast or just chatting, texting or whatever, but I never really bought into the overall quality of the team because there were, and I went to a few of the early season games. I mean, it was not, the opponents were not that great. I told you about numerous times balls fell in the outfield that would not, giving Virginia extra outs, pitchers, UVA pitchers getting guys to swing at, undisciplined hitters. And I worried that once the level of competition amped up a little bit, if that would, I knew we weren't going to go 46-2 over the next 24 games or whatever we went, but I worried that our pitching staff would be a little suspect because we had a pretty good staff last year. And it's hard to replace those guys in just 1 year. So it wasn't a total surprise to me. But, your answer is, how are you going to fix the schedule? Because no one's of a quality opponent's going to come to UVA in February or early March.
Right.
So how are you going to replace a Hofstra or a Ryder? You're not going to replace them with an ECU or a Coastal Carolina or an SEC team. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, and I did a piece. I spent way too much time on it probably, considering that UVA baseball fans aren't wanting to click on stories about UVA baseball now that the season's over, but examining the schedule and the impact and all that kind of stuff, because I did see that on social media a bit this weekend, especially after Sunday's loss. Maybe it was just too weak of a schedule. And, so I did find that it was a very weak schedule. 26-3 start, 13-6 finish, 29 games on both sides of that. And Virginia won half the amount of games in the second half of that schedule than they did in the first half. The aggregate record of the first half foes was 383 and 476, and just 6 of the 16 opponents finished with winning records. Only 3 of those teams got NCAA bids. In the second half of the season, those teams were 543 and 324. That's about a 600 winning percentage. And 13 of those 15 had winning records. After 6 of the first 16 had winning records, and 9 of the 15 went to the NCAAs. And 2 of the teams who didn't were ODU and Clemson, and they were pretty close to getting NCAA bids. In fact, ODU should have gotten one. Clemson maybe was a step or two down.
How do you keep ODU? I just saw their record, 41-17.
Yeah, and they finished pretty hot. Now they lost their last 2 games in their conference tournament, but I mean they had won like 10 straight going into that. And this was a team that was 44-14 last year and was a number 1 regional seed. So they lost 3 more games this year, and didn't even get in the tournament this year. But then I looked at Virginia Tech, and Virginia Tech had a similar. Virginia's schedule was actually tougher than Virginia Tech's. Both the overall strength of schedule and the non-conference strength of schedule was tougher. I don't want to necessarily say, Scott, that it was feasting on bad teams, because what I would say, when you look at a couple other things too, Virginia was what was it? What I have here? The Virginia was 19-18 against teams with winning records. Virginia Tech 23-12. Virginia actually played more games against teams with winning records than Virginia Tech did. Virginia Tech's in the Super Regionals this weekend. The key difference is that Virginia Tech was just better against good teams than Virginia was. So I think that's a pretty. I mean, I did all that work, all this, looking at every team's record, all their strength of schedule and everything else, and it took me a couple hours to get all this together for a 500-word story. And it comes down to Virginia just wasn't good enough against good teams. And it's even hard to say, Scott. To me, it's hard to say that the pitching wasn't good in the first half. The team ERA after 29 games was 2.71. Now in the second half, it was 5.5. So, what it says, there were a few things I would say, Scott, and I get your opinions on this. You follow the program as closely as I do, maybe even more so. I felt like there was a lack of development by Brian O'Connor and Drew Dickinson, the pitching coach, of the pitching staff just in general. You had two starters that were pretty good. They struggled down the stretch, Nate Savino and Brian Gursky. And after that, you really didn't have stability at the 3 spot, and you definitely didn't have a fourth starter developed. You've seen Virginia develop a fourth starter, like use the midweek spot to essentially get a guy ready to go 4 or 5 or 6 innings. I'm thinking of Artie Slawicki from back in the good teams back in the mid 2010s. Will Roberts, guy who threw a perfect game back in the early 2010s. There was nothing. It was just sort of they just treated those as staff days. And there certainly wasn't the depth that we had last year. Boy, that team last year did have, you mentioned this earlier, had a lot of depth in the pitching staff. But, they just didn't develop that this year. The offense was good, but when the offense wasn't, it was good on season numbers, but when it wasn't good in a particular game, there wasn't enough pitching to win that game. And so that's weird. I mean, it's strange to say because Brian O'Connor's been to 5 College World Series. He's been to a number of Super Regionals, and he's done it on the backbone of good pitching. And this year, they just didn't develop it from day one to the end of the season.
Well, and you made that note about the pitching, the ERA during the first. Repeat that again. First 29 games.
First 29, it was 2.71, and the last 29, it was over 5.5.
So, once the second half of the season, from a chronological or numbers standpoint, we hit that second half. We're playing mostly ACC, a lot of ACC games. At least 3 out of the 4 or 5 a week are ACC teams. I agree that the development wasn't there, and the ACC pitching, the game of baseball, pitching and hitting. It's about the pitcher making adjustments to the hitters, and hitters making adjustments to pitchers, right?
Yeah.
And once conference play started, the conference, there are other teams in the conference, they scouted UVA. You can do it pretty easily now because most of the games are on some platform of TV. And I'm wondering if it was just the fact that some of the weaknesses that our pitchers were getting away with early on against lesser competition, if you want to call it that, because of the way the conference is scouted. And hitting coaches look at opposing pitchers in advance, that the hitters were making their adjustments, but our pitchers weren't making their adjustments.
Well, and the pitchers at the college level are their pitch selection is called for them from the dugout. It's not the pitcher and catcher like you're used to largely at the major league level. I'm not sure there are any major league teams where the pitching coach calls the pitches. In college, the pitching coach calls the pitches. And I want to get away from the weak early schedule argument again because, a team just down the road from Charlottesville is in the Super Regionals playing a weaker schedule. And so, give them credit maybe for adjusting. I get it back to Virginia not adjusting. Virginia's coaching staff not adjusting. I mean, we love Brian O'Connor and, I don't know Drew Dickinson. We love Brian O'Connor. We've had him on the podcast. Jerry and I have had him on the podcast several times. But sometimes the emperor's wearing no clothes. I really think that what stands out is those guys were so good in the first half. And it'd be one thing if they went from a 2.71 ERA in the first half, and okay, the opposition gets stronger and it ticks up to 3.5 or 4. But to double the ERA in the second half suggests that it suggests that Nate Savino was 1-5 in his starts until he did get the win in the NCAA tournament game, the one win Virginia got over Coastal Carolina. He was really good in that game, but he was 1-5 from April 4th up until that game against Coastal last Friday, over about an almost 2-month stretch of the season. He's a guy that's projected to be a top 5-round pick in the upcoming draft, upcoming Major League draft. Brian Gursky, pretty solid season. Jake Berry, the 3 starter, Scott, you and I texted about this. He's either going to give you 6 shutout innings with 10 strikeouts, or he's going to give you an inning and 2/3. He kind of did both in Sunday's game. 4 really good innings. I think he gave up 2 hits and 1 walk. The walk he picked off in the first inning. Nobody got to second base through 4 innings. He gets a 6-0 lead. He got 1 out in the 5th and couldn't get out of that inning. And by the time that inning was over, or the next inning was over, it was already 6-6. It just feels to me like there were elements of guys there, but Brandon Neek started. Brandon Neek was the opening day starter. He finished the season as a long reliever. That feels like a failure to me. That guy has such good stuff and so much promise. We never developed an effective 3 starter, but you need a 4th starter to get through the first weekend of the NCAA tournament. Unless you win all 3 games, you need a 4th starter. The bullpen was overused. I mean, there were issues in the pitching staff. It just seems like from pitcher 1 to how many ever guys there were issues.
Yeah, and when your starting pitching falters early, it's a domino effect.
Yeah,
because then you got to start going to the bullpen, and unless you're pitching what's now called a bullpen game, or then those things aren't really playing. But if you look back over the entire season from where we were last year, losing pretty much a big chunk of our productivity and as far as starting pitching goes, 39 wins, I think most people would have taken that, except the way it happened. If it would have been more evened out over the course of the season, you and I probably wouldn't be, and probably 95% of the message board wouldn't be lamenting what a failure, what a failure that the season was. But, if you look back over the season again, when we did get good, I guess this is just typical of teams that are just scuffling, like we did the second half of the season. When we did get good pitching, we couldn't score. And some games we were hitting pretty well. We were, scoring runs, and we just had abysmal pitching. So, that's just what happens when a team gets in a funk,
They weren't rolling. Yeah, last year's team started 11-14, got to the College World Series, and actually had a chance to go through the winners bracket all the way to the championship series. I had a no hitter in the 8th inning of Game 2, and Texas rallied and threw things off there. But last year's team started 11-14. This year's team finished 13-16. An unfortunate bookend because in the middle of that, you had a run to the College World Series, and you had a 26-3 start, number 3 ranking national polls. And this season seemed like it was building on last season. I mean, the role at the end of last season, boy, 26-3, you're thinking, yeah, this team is one of the best 3 or 4 teams in college baseball. There were a lot of people thinking early on that it was Tennessee and Virginia. Tennessee's maintained its spot. Virginia did not. And that said, Scott, what your point's right. I mean, this Virginia team, even in the second half when they struggled, they swept a Carolina team that's in the Super Regionals now. They swept them. I was there for one of the games. The 3-game series with Virginia Tech won Game 3 after having a rally from a big early deficit in Game 3, and I think they won by 1 or 2 runs in that game. I mean, a couple Super Regional teams there. They lost Game 3 of a 3-game series with Louisville, who's I think in the Super Regionals now. So, even in defeat in the second half of the season, they swept one Super Regional team. They had a couple others on the ropes for series wins, did Virginia. But yeah, that's what it is. It's frustrating that it ends this way. And I guess one way I'll take the positive approach, because there is a positive approach. There's a lot of guys coming back next year.
A lot. You
Maybe
got a kid that had 81 runs batted in.
and
That'll be back.
a school record 81 runs batted in, a school record 21 homers. He's back. Nate Savino won't be back. I'm sure they'll have to replenish the starting rotation. It'll be interesting to see if
which may not be a bad thing.
Which may not be because this year you only really had two guys that you could rely on. Maybe Jay Woolfolk steps up. He was used as a very valuable setup man this year, the backup quarterback / setup man to the back end of the bullpen. He was looked at coming out of high school as a guy who could get drafted in the first couple of rounds until he told teams in the MLB that he was going to go to college. He still got drafted late, but he's a guy that could maybe work his way into a starting role. As far as everyday lineup, there's a lot of guys. Casey Salke was a freshman. You got Kyle Teal coming back for a junior year.
Anderson or the freshman.
Ethan Anderson was a freshman. Yeah, Geloff will be a junior next year. I think I mentioned Teal. Griffo Farrell, the starting shortstop, was a true freshman this year. Key guys that will be back anchoring this team next year, but you do have to find some pitching. Maybe you find it internally. Maybe there's some guys on the recruiting trail from the preps. Maybe you'll find some transfers, but there is a foundation for another solid season next year. But it just felt like to me, Scott, that there was more out of this team that we should have seen.
Yeah, I agree, but I do think that you got Coach O'Connor at the helm. I'm confident. Got a lot of confidence in him. The program, hey, the transfer portal cures all problems now. So I think I texted you. I'd like to see us get some transfers from SEC schools and maybe not Harvard and Yale and Georgetown and schools like that. But,
well, I'll disagree. I didn't respond to that text. I'll disagree with you there, because the SEC school guys, you're not going to get their top talent. You're not going to get their guys. Those guys are going to be SEC guys. But baseball, you know this as well as I do, Scott. Baseball, it doesn't matter what your pedigree is to a degree. It matters can you throw the ball. And this is the only reason I'm disappointed in this year's season is that you got Brian O'Connor and Drew Dickinson. I mean, Brian O'Connor was a pitching coach, and he's all those years with Carl Kuhn and their great partnership. And I think last year you saw that O'Connor and Dickinson had a great partnership. They got a lot out of that staff last year. I don't think they got as much out of the staff this year as they could have gotten. But man, if you're getting guys who can already if they already have the pitches and all they really need is someone to help them put it together. There's not two better guys who can, generally speaking, help you put it together than Brian O'Connor and Drew Dickinson. They have a track record. And so this year I'm a little disappointed, but find some diamonds in the rough. Guys who I see them in the Southern Conference all the time, Scott. Most of the guys, and it's actually the case in the ACC as much as it is anywhere else. When you look at the radar gun, you see guys throwing 85, 86 and getting outs. And then occasionally in my SoCon games, when I broadcast for ESPN Plus, the VMI games, you'll see a guy all of a sudden, whoa, that guy's throwing 94 and he's got a plus slider. How did this guy get to the SoCon? Well, maybe he developed that when he got there. And let's get that guy. Right. There are guys like that out there who, when they were in high school, maybe they were 6 feet tall and 180 pounds. And then they, shot up a couple inches and put on 20 pounds and had a good pitching coach in the Ivy League or the SoCon or MEAC or something like that. And all of a sudden they're hitting 94, 95 with some plus off speed stuff. And they got a year or two of eligibility and they want to learn under a guy who's got a lot of guys playing minor league baseball and a few guys in the majors. There's worse ways to go than finding those guys.
Yeah, Chris, talking about transfer portal, I'm wondering if this transfer portal, I'll call it nonsense, continues with players not having to sit out.
I'm assuming that's going to be the case. So, yeah.
I wonder, that is going to affect, I think, college baseball, the recruiting aspect, recruiting mentality of college baseball, maybe have more of an impact in college baseball than college basketball or football, because college seniors or high school seniors have the option. And how many times has UVA recruited a really top flight high school senior only to have that kid at the last moment decide to go play for the Timbuktu Looney Birds and take the $350,000 bonus
Well, there was a
and
guy last year
leave
who
UVA hanging?
There was a guy last year. Yeah, there was one guy last year took the small bonus, and then one guy, I can't think of his name, but he was a first round pick, and O'Connor had been recruiting him since he was a freshman in high school, and he ended up being like the 8th or ninth pick, and he got more than $350,000. He got
Yeah,
a
and we knew
five or
that was
six
going to
million
happen.
dollars.
But
But that
so,
happens.
so
Yeah.
wonder how often, I don't know. This would be a good question. Maybe if you have Coach O'Connor back on, do you shift gears a little bit? And does the recruiting really take place once they get to college? Because after their freshman year, you've got them for 2 more years, where you recruit a high school player and he signs maybe a year ahead of time. And then a month before school starts, because I think the signing deadline is in August.
I think it's in early August.
Early August, they decide to take that last second offer that the major league team is throwing out, and you're left with nothing. So I wonder if this transfer thing is really going to have more impact in college baseball than it does in college football or basketball.
Well, I think it's having an impact in college football and basketball for similar reasons. You when you take a writer on a prep guy in those two sports too, it's the same kind of thing. We're projecting what kind of athlete that person will be a year or two away. Most people don't. I mean, except for the one and dones in basketball, most people don't do a lot their freshman year. And especially in football, a lot of guys end up redshirting. But in baseball, there's another factor you throw in there too. Unlike in football or basketball, you don't get a full scholarship in baseball. You get a partial, and it's a percentage scholarship. And when I say it's anywhere from 0.10 to 0.50, 0.60, something like that. And so there's another aspect. Okay, so I'm a pitcher at VMI. I was the number 10 pitcher in the state, but I was 5'10" then, and now I'm 6'4". I was 170. Now I'm 230. I was throwing 84. Now I'm throwing 94. And I've only been there for a year, and they're only giving me 0.25%. And UVA comes up and says, well, not only will we have you pitch in the ECC, we'll give you 0.6.
Right.
And so there is that aspect, certainly. And, more exposure. The scouts are watching you pitch against better opposition, especially in April and May and June. And so, yeah, and this is the case a lot. I mean, in the other sports too. Then me and VMI, I do I broadcast various sports there. In addition to all my hard work covering UVA sports, the programs in Southern Conference and that level of conference, they feel like they're feeders now to the Power Five, because they put a lot of time and effort. The coaches there put a lot of time and effort into developing guys. That they have to find the diamonds in the rough in the first place, and then they develop them and get them to be, better than diamonds in the rough. And then those kids say, "Hey, I'm kind of thinking about it, the ACC or the Big Ten or the SEC next year. I'd love to play there 1 year." They didn't even give me a sniff out of high school, but now they want me. That's a problem for those programs. That they're almost like minor leagues now for the big guys.
Oh, for certain. So moving away from UVA baseball, but sticking with college baseball. I've been watching a lot of the college games, and I don't know how much you've watched of the other games, but I think that what ESPN is doing as far as the on-air talent is a total injustice to the college baseball.
It is.
Some of these guys, Chris, are worse than horrendous. Not only I'm not even critiquing their voice, because I don't have the greatest voice, but I'm not even suggesting I don't like the way they talk or the way they sound. They're not prepared.
Right.
They're totally unprepared. And to me, there's no justification to that at all. These guys are getting paid. They're on a national platform. And to come into these games and not know anything about the team and still have them sitting in their living rooms, that to me. So I made a couple of comments, a couple of
Okay.
things that I heard. The first, we talked about the Greg Golson doing the UVA Coastal Carolina, talking about what a great atmosphere it was. And he's doing the game from it looks like his laundry room.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. How do you know what kind of atmosphere is going on? We joked about it. I said, yeah, he said it just had the smell of the ballpark. No, that was your dirty underwear laying in the laundry basket just off the camera view. Last night during the Maryland game, I wrote this because I thought we would talk about something. So the announcer last night, the Maryland pitcher had a bases loaded situation with one out. And the play-by-play guy goes, yeah, this is a real tough. This is a tough situation for the Maryland reliever. Who was the third baseman?
Yeah.
Maryland used 10 pitchers last night. Okay. And they brought the third baseman over to pitch. And he came in and it was second and third with one out or no outs. And the play-by-play announcer said, this is a tough situation for this Maryland player. And the color guy goes, this would be a tough situation for Mario Rivera. And the first thing that came to my mind was, no, it wouldn't. It really wouldn't. In his peak, in his prime, rather, no, that would not be a tough situation.
He could break an aluminum bat with that cut fastball.
Yeah. And it reminded me of something. I used to attend a lot of baseball games with my cousin, and we'd go to Oriole games, and a shortstop would not make a play in the hole. And I would say, oh my gosh, I could make that play. And on cue, my cousin would look at me and say, no, you couldn't. Or a high fly ball to the outfield, the wall, the player, or a line shot to the outfield that went in. And I'm going, I could make that play in my prime. No, you couldn't. And then this was, I didn't pick this up, but I was reading something about awful announcing. So the other night, it was last night, it was Stanford. I think it may have been the Maryland game. So Maryland down by 2 runs, had a runner at first, the batter at the plate, and the color guy goes, he represents the go-ahead run.
Well, remember in the Virginia Coastal game on Sunday, the second game between those two, one of the Coastal players hit a 2-run homer, and the play-by-play guy was so excited that he said, and that gives Coastal Carolina its first lead of the day. And, it's one of those things where in this day and age, it's called gaslighting. I'm pretty sure it was 6-4 and there was one guy on base, and that 2-run homer would be 6-6. But I'm looking at the score on the TV, and I've got stats up on my phone, and I'm like, maybe it was a 3-run homer. No, he just lost sight of it's little things like that. Let me go to the bigger picture. Here's the big. So I didn't watch it wall to wall quite like you did, Scott, but I did sample quite a few games over the weekend. Here's where me being, Southern Conference broadcaster, I did 18 games this spring for ESPN Plus, all at VMI. Hey, I got to broadcast a Virginia Tech game. They're in the Super Regionals. VCU should have been in the Super Regionals. Got to broadcast one of their games, and a bunch of ODU who should have been in the tournament, and then a bunch of SoCon games. So I'm listening to some of these people, and I could tell that there's a lack of preparation. Even one color guy who I can't think of any of their names, but the one color guy even kind of bragged about. It might have been Greg Olson, actually. I kind of bragged about how. I'm not one who does a lot of, preparation. I'm not looking at stats. I'm just telling you what I'm seeing, which is fine, except if you don't know the teams, But I found an ESPN press room press release that had gave the names of the play-by-play and color commentator at each regional, And so I started looking up some of the names, and here's the answer as to why it was so bad. I mean, no offense to these people, I guess, in a sense. They got hired, they're doing a job. But, I kept seeing co-host of a Sirius XM show. This person's from MLB Network's Sirius XM show. This person is an ESPN college football analyst. This person is an ESPN college basketball play-by-play person. What I didn't see was anybody who did any ESPN college baseball games this year. Um, and so for a lot of those folks, they were doing their first college baseball of the spring. And it's not MLB. It's not college basketball. It's not college football. It's college baseball. And now that said, you can do homework. They're getting paid like I got. I get paid a couple $100 a game, literally $200 a game to do my VMI games. All right. So, I do homework. I look up when they got a 3-game series of Wofford coming up next weekend. I'm studying Wofford. I'm watching some highlights of games. I'm delving into their website, looking at all their stats, looking at last year's stats, see who's improved, that kind of thing. I'm spending a couple hours researching. It didn't sound like these people did that work. They just kind of I would say showed up at the ballpark. I was getting ready to say, Scott, they showed up at the ballpark. You know what they didn't do? They didn't even show up at the ballpark. From a fan standpoint, that is very frustrating because largely now there were a few people like you and I, Scott. Now we watched the Virginia games closely, and then you and I would watch. You watched more than me, but we would watch the other games. If we're watching Maryland play UConn like last night, we don't know anything about Maryland and UConn, so they can get away with not telling us anything about Maryland and UConn. But a lot of a large percentage of that audience watching Maryland, UConn, watching Virginia, Coastal Carolina, watching Texas A&M and whoever they were playing out in their regional. The large majority of those fans know one or both those teams pretty well. And if you mess something up about their teams, they know it. And the fact that you didn't do your homework, ESPN's got to expect more. But when you hire people who don't do college baseball all spring, maybe that's what you get.
I agree. And it's just not acceptable because they're getting paid to do a job.
Yeah.
And like you, when you do VMI games, you do the research because your audience knows a lot about those two teams.
Yeah.
You're not going to bluff your way through that because the audience that's listening to you know as much, if not more, about those two teams or one of those two teams that you do. Yeah. Just like when we watch Virginia, I did hear that comment, that analyst say, well, I don't really do a lot of prep on these. And I'm thinking to myself, really? You didn't, like, you had to tell us that?
I wouldn't brag, and they don't even have to leave their house. I mean, they're sitting in their living room or their den or their laundry room, as you mentioned, Scott. I've got to go to the games, and ESPN's doing this a lot now. They do have people at game sites in college football season and college basketball season. Not all the time, they do sometimes, but I would love to be able to sit here at this very chair that I'm sitting at right now. I'd love to be able to sit here and not have to take that hour drive down and an hour drive back. And, I've done games in Greensboro, and I've done, take a 3.5 hour drive down and back and that kind of thing. And I'd love to be able to do that. But if you gave me that extra hour, I would spend that extra hour not just eating nachos and watching somebody else's game. I'd be researching the damn teams I'm getting ready to broadcast. That's just insulting to us as fans that they don't do a better job, that ESPN doesn't expect a better job than that out of them.
Well, and Chris, compare that to how CBS does the NCAA tournament.
There you go.
You've got Reggie Miller working Thursday opening round games on True TV.
They got 3-person teams, largely 3-man teams. There are a few women who jump in as broadcasters too. They got 3-man teams plus sideline reporters on grounds there. Because we know that they're there. I mean, in addition to the fact that you see them on camera occasionally on your broadcast, because we've sat courtside with them. When we have been covering UVA games in past years. So CBS takes it seriously. ESPN doesn't.
And I know there's a lot of discrepancy in the amount of revenue coming in from an NCAA men's basketball tournament and an NCAA regional baseball tournament. But if you want to grow the sport, which they do, that's been the aspirations of college baseball to grow the sport, then you need to invest in it. And to me, they're just putting out such a shabby product that it's insulting.
It was going to use another word that was also appropriate that starts with an SH. It is that product. And I looked at the Virginia Tech region. I didn't watch any of that regional because the Tech games coincided largely with the time of the UVA games. And I didn't care watching Columbia play Gonzaga. I wasn't even aware they played baseball at Gonzaga. So I'm glad that they got in a tournament and all that.
Or
But
Columbia.
yeah, Columbia. I think we stole one of their guys this year, didn't we? One of those Ivy League guys. But I looked at at the broad, and their broadcast was very regional. It was one of those where it was a serious network host and a former or college football analyst kind of situation. And thought to myself, I mean, I'm not the only one, but because there are other broadcasters who, I mean, if you just said, Chris, if somebody had called me and said, Chris, do you want to broadcast the Blacksburg Regional? Hell yes, I would. And I would drive, and I'm driving there. I'm not going to sit. No, Chris, you got to sit in your house and do it. I mean, what is the hard part of having people in the stadium? ESPN learned a bad lesson during the pandemic that they hid everybody at home, and that was fine during the pandemic. Pandemic's over. They're not doing this now because there's a pandemic going on. We're all out there mingling with everybody. This is not about the pan. It's just about being cheap now. They didn't want to have to put these teams up in hotels, pay them mileage they don't pay me mileage to go to Lexington, but they don't want to have to pay them mileage and put them in a hotel and all this jazz. And it's not like they're not paying these people, Scott, what Reggie Miller and Dan Bonner and PJ Carlesimo and Raftery and everybody else is getting paid to do the NCAA basketball tournament, but they could still treat this a little more seriously, like they actually care about having the contract of this. And if they don't care about having the contract of this, let's put it up to bidding and see if Fox or CBS wants to take it over.
Exactly. And here's the other thing too. Now, we both have ESPN Plus package, or I did. I canceled it now since my favorite celebrity, Chris Graham, is no longer doing games. This is the NCAA tournament. These guys are on national television, either ESPN, ESPN2, ESPNU, ESPN News. Okay. These are this isn't two college kids doing a UVA VCU game on a Tuesday night. This is
those games are on ESPN Plus and they're still national.
They're still national, but you know what I'm saying? They're not on the main platform of ESPN. To me, the NCAA needs to either rebid this or they need to make ESPN step up to the plate a little bit because it's pathetic. It's pathetic.
It's abysmal. Yeah. Hey, let's talk about, you asked me some questions the other day about the it's been a few days now, the groundbreaking at UVA on the new football ops center. Big news. Scott, I'm not sure if I ever believed it would actually happen, to be honest with you, considering how the master plan has been in place for over 4 years now. We both know some of the people who are involved chiefly in fundraising for this project, and they finally broke ground last week. So Virginia is now committed fully to the arms race and trying to keep up with the Joneses, the Clemsons. This is reminiscent of the late 80s when Clemson built Clemson built like a $7 or $8 million football center. So we built a $11 million McHugh center. And ours was like, theirs was a 9,000 square foot and ours was 11,000 square foot. Now Clemson, in 2017 opened up the $55 million, their football ops center. And Virginia is now spending $90 million 5 years later on its football ops center. So we're trying to keep up with Clemson. But yeah, we broke ground. It'll be open in early 2025, according to Carla Williams. And Virginia is now formally trying to be a big boy again.
We're in the arms race. But, you clarified it for me because when I listened, I was heading to that press conference on Thursday until we had a Wizard of Oz storm come through my neighborhood. And I felt like I should stay at home with my dogs who were hiding under the bed. So I did listen to it again on YouTube. And the thing that I won't say concerned, but it kind of caught my attention a little bit was Carla was, to me, and now that I think back on it, you've kind of calmed my fears a little bit. She was emphasizing efficiency, emphasizing it's not loaded on with bells, whistles and bells and whistles,
It's not
whatever you want to
flashy,
say.
she said one time. Yeah.
Not flashy. And I'm thinking, did we just not get enough money? Are we just going through and putting up something just to say we're doing it? Because those kind of words, I remembered back to an Andy Griffith episode where Andy and Barney had set Gomer up with a date that was ugly as all get out. And he kept asking about, is she pretty? And they kept saying, oh, she's nice. She's real nice. And I kept thinking, is this that situation where we're building something, but we're kind of cutting corners and we're not really diving into the deep end? But you say no, that we're actually spending more money than Clemson did.
A good bit more. And the only thing is, it's not going to have a 20-foot indoor slide. It's not going to have a bowling alley. That's what Clemson has. I think another program has like a movie theater in its performance center, what they call it. It's not going to have that. It's going to be 90,000 square feet, 2 stories, right beside the existing George Welsh indoor practice facility, adjacent to the 2 outdoor grass practice fields. And it'll have everything that Virginia needs. And the only bad news is it's 2022, and this isn't going to be ready. The construction is slated to end in like the middle of 2024, but Carla Williams said not in time for the football program to comfortably move in before the 2024 season. So they're going to wait until after the 2024 season, basically spring 2025. The move of all the offices and everything else will be completed. And the football program, starting with that spring practice, will have that as its base of operations starting that season. So it's, there's a couple more seasons to go before that happens. But
there is. But let me tell you, I was talking to a member of the staff, of the coaching staff, about that, and that was my point. Was it's a couple years away. Well, a good coaching staff, which I think we have, they're going to use this because they're recruiting sophomores.
Yes.
They're going to tell these sophomores and juniors, when you step foot on grounds, this is what you're going to walk into. Yeah. They're recruiting seniors in high school right now, but they're behind. And, they're kind of behind the 8 ball in some of the high school seniors because this staff hasn't been together except since January. So, but they're really going out and making inroads into recruiting high school juniors, high school sophomores. And those are the kids that are going to walk into that new facility.
And it reminds me that Jerry and I had on the podcast, this has probably been last year now, but we've had, among the people we've had, I'm remembering Chris Slade and Ray Roberts specifically on this point. They were both recruited to Virginia. In fact, their first, I don't think they were able to be in the new McHugh Center until later in their UVA careers. I want to say Roberts graduated in 90 and Slade in 91. And they were recruited to UVA when UVA football was still operating out of what the staff called the trailer park, just a bunch of modular trailers that were set up there to provide extra office space. That group was able to recruit. They recruited a team that went 10-3 in 1989 and was ranked number 1 in the country for 3 weeks in 1990, on the promise of, hey, by the time you're done here, you'll be able to go into this new facility. That's what a good coaching staff does. Yeah, we've got this coming online.
It's no longer a vision.
Yeah,
they can get when they start visiting the university, they're going to see bulldozers and backhoes and people with hard hats, and it's going to and UVA, which I think does a great job in PR. They're going to use. I have a feeling they're going to maximize that PR of that facility.
Because
they're going to have it online. They're going to have a webcam.
Yeah.
Everything.
Well, the indoor practice facility is right next door. So are those the grass practice fields. The team rarely practices in Scott Stadium. So the kids who, as they get ready for summer conditioning, and then the fall practices will be all right there, and then the recruits who are brought in to like get a taste of the program, they'll be there for those kind of things too. No, yeah, no doubt that's going to be the focal point. Look what we're doing. We're moving ground. Name the other schools recruiting you and what are they doing right now? And even if Clemson's one of those schools recruiting you, ours is going to be bigger. I mean, just say it like it is. It's going to be bigger, and better. So, and newer. And so, you'll get everything you need here and more out of our facility. I mean, now, I don't want to overstate it, but think about where our mindset was as fans and close journalists who cover the program as well. Think about in the when JPJ was having dirt moved, and where Virginia basketball was when JPJ was having dirt moved, and think about Virginia basketball where it is now. I mean, this, I mean, if it can have any kind of similar effect, that would be massive for Virginia football.
We haven't even talked about Virginia, how this is going to help the non-revenue Olympic sports.
Right. Because there's another phase of this project, another $90 million that will build an Olympic Sports Performance Center. And that work starts next spring. So, this isn't just football. Virginia doesn't. I mean, Clemson spent $55 million on football. Virginia is spending $180 million on all of its programs. So, good point there.
I think most Virginia fans are, we know football pays the bills, football and basketball, but there's a lot of pride. I mean, I go to a lot of the games, work a lot of the games. There is a tremendous amount of pride in women's field hockey.
Yeah.
No, there's not 10,000 people there, but they want to put it. If they're going to wear a uniform that says Virginia across the front of it, they want to put a very representative team, and it takes money to do that. And you can't, again, you can't do but so much on scholarships, but you can do it in infrastructure. And it seems like that's where we are really going to be reaping some rewards in these Olympic sports. I don't even want to call them minor sports because that's not I've seen enough of these games. I watch these kids participate. Believe me, their passion for field hockey, the passion for women's volleyball is just as much as you see Kia Clark given in basketball, just as much.
And Virginia has spent money. I mean, I'm thinking way back, 1994, Klockner Stadium opens for the soccer. At that time, the soccer program was in the midst of the men's soccer program, in the midst of a long run of NCAA championships. I think the women's lacrosse team was actually pretty good then too. I was a student at UVA in the early 90s, and one of my neighbors was a two-time national champion women's lacrosse player. So, but you think of Klockner, you think of the improvements at Davenport in the early 2000s that have continued really up until a couple of years ago. The most recent improvements there, the new softball facility, the JPJ comes online. There were improvements made to Scott Stadium, and then the stuff you don't see. You see those things, but the stuff you don't see. Inside of JPJ, it's not, you don't see the bowels like you and I get to sometimes, Scott, but the training facilities within JPJ, and now getting everything under one roof for football in terms of training facilities, training and academic advisement facilities, and the lockers and just the support there that goes. And that's going to be the same thing for all the other sports, what we call the Olympic sports. Virginia fields teams in 27 sports. Maybe Carolina's close to us, and then Stanford on the West Coast has a couple more than we do. They were cutting some programs recently, so we might be in the same realm as they are now. But not most ACC programs don't field as many varsity programs as Virginia does, and they will all have not only those nice facilities to play the games in, but they will have state-of-the-art training and performance and academic performance facilities to be able to take advantage of. Because in the end, I mean, that commercial's right. 99% of the student athletes don't end up playing professionally. They go on in other parts of life and make the world a better place. That's they're building young men and young women there, and that's what this money is about. The $180 million, 90 for football, 90 for the other Olympic sports. is about the building the young people, and that's what Virginia is putting its money into.
Yeah, and Chris, these Olympic sports, I can't think of any that I would say. The only one that you could say was consistently bad, and you can't even say that anymore, was softball.
Yeah.
And I worked a couple of softball games last year. Let me tell you, Virginia softball, I would not be surprised if we didn't make the NCAA tournament next year. They have probably one of the nicest softball facilities in the entire country. Look at the regionals.
Yeah.
Some of these powerhouse teams, they look like they play on glorified high school fields.
Oh, right. No doubt. And Virginia's got this great facility, and
we have a tremendous facility.
And a team that's starting to play like they want to be a part of a great facility. This year they played Virginia Tech at home in a 3-game series and took one of the three, and game 3 came down to extra innings. And Virginia Tech was ranked 3rd in the country and got upset in its regional, and as a result, got upset in its super regional, and didn't make it to the College World Series. But Virginia is on par with some pretty good programs in that respect. And so, yeah, I mean, Klockner, it was built at first for soccer. The soccer team and lacrosse teams used to have to play on that ugly artificial turf football field, and you put all these lines down and everything else. Now they've got a dedicated facility. That place is rocking. I mean, soccer in the fall and lacrosse in the spring. I think the stadium holds 8,000. Just in terms of seats, and then there's overflow where you can sit on the grass or stand along the fence.
The record crowd for men's lacrosse was 11,200.
Yeah, you beat me to it there. That's so Virginia fans. Yeah, it's not just we call them non-revenue sports. I don't think non-revenue sports works out because. I've gone on Fridays and Saturdays when there are people out tailgating before a lacrosse game, tailgating before a baseball or softball game. People who sit and tailgate, they're dedicated fans, and those places are packed. And we may not profit handsomely. They're not bringing in the money that football and men's basketball do, but they're bringing in money. They're not non-revenue sports anymore.
And baseball, again, back not picking, kicking a dog while he's down or whatever the saying is. What ESPN has done for baseball is not helping the sport grow, because there are a few schools, and I was told that Virginia is on the cusp of making baseball almost a break-even proposition. Because again, you remember, they're not giving away full scholarships.
Right.
And travel is contained, much less. You're not putting 85 guys in a hotel room,
right, and
feeding them. You're sending them. I know where they stay, mostly on the road. They're not staying in Motel 6s, but they're not staying in the 5-star hotels either. So it's much more affordable. The ESPN, if they want to do their part to enhance that, then they got to upgrade the announcing. But the Olympic sports in Virginia is important, and it looks like we're all in on it.
All in, yeah, no doubt. Well, what else, Scott, has your attention as a observer, reporter, fan of Virginia athletics, college baseball, whatever in general right now?
I'm a little concerned about NIL.
Okay,
but because there's nothing I can do about it, I'm going to keep calm and carry on and just pretend that these are amateur athletes. I think NIL. I'm going to cling to the Chris Graham theory of economics, that once these folks that with big fat wallets realize we aren't really getting a lot out of this, they stop, or at least it's back to what it was intended to be. Put a few extra bucks in a kid's wallet, not a few million extra bucks in a kid's wallet.
Yeah, I think that the rumors of what you hear about, so many players profiting so much from NIL are overstated. We know that Bryce Young at Alabama, I think Nick Saban confirmed that he made $800,000 from NIL last year. But then Saban also said that his entire team brought down a total of $3 million last year. So if Bryce Young got 800,000 of that, that's 84 other scholarship guys splitting up 2.2 million. That ain't a lot.
And eventually, that's not going to work.
That's not going. Well, I know the argument is, how does that work in the locker room?
Yes.
How does Tom Brady make as much money as he makes, and then there's a guy returning punts making the league minimum? I mean, it works in other sports too. But my thing is, I know that there were some people raising issue with, well, gosh, Armando Bacot came back and Caleb Love came back and Drew Timme is back at Gonzaga, and maybe that's
20th season.
20th season. That shows you how NIL, they're getting paid more to go back to college than they would in the NBA. Newsflash. Those are all three of those guys are really, really good college players. None of them are going to play in the NBA. I hate to burst anybody's bubble. None of them are going to play in the NBA. And that's why they're back. It's not they're not back because NIL is paying them more than the NBA would. NIL is paying them more than Europe would. That's why they're back.
They're back because the NBA didn't come a knocking.
The Drew Timme I saw as a projected like 55th, 56th, 57th pick on a few draft boards. There were several draft boards that left him off. Bacot similar. The highest I saw for him was mid to upper 40s, and he wasn't guaranteed. There were several that left him off. And so, when you're making your decision as a young student athlete, do I want to test the NBA draft waters? Well, you do if you're a projected first round pick. Because first round picks get guaranteed 5-year deals. The money is slotted. You know how much you're going to make. If you don't pan out, they still owe you the money. If you're a second round pick or an undrafted free agent, good luck. You might make your team, you might not. Look at Kyle Guy. We love Kyle Guy. I got a Kyle Guy jersey hanging here in my podcast room. Kyle Guy was a second round pick. He gets 10-day contracts occasionally to play in the NBA. He's putting up 25 points a game in the G League, and he's making nothing. So that's your choice there. It's not NIL's making you more money than the NBA would. The NIL's paying you more than Europe or the G League would, and it ain't hard to pay more than a G League would. They don't make hardly anything.
Yeah, and both of us watch enough NBA I'm not pretending I'm a GM. Or an ex-player, but I can just tell you, my eyes tell me the eye test is Bacot, Timme from Gonzaga, Caleb Love. I'm not sure if Caleb Love is an NBA player.
Well, it's easy to break down because Timme and Bacot. How many back to the basket 6'9" guys are there in the NBA right now?
I could probably count them on one hand.
I think I can count them on no hands.
Yeah, maybe so. So their games do not transition to the NBA.
No, they're used in college like guys were used 20 years ago, but NBA doesn't play that way. 6'9" guys set screens and have to be able to shoot threes. They don't play with their back to the basket. They don't do drop steps. They're not shooting turnaround jumpers. The NBA doesn't play that way. The NBA doesn't play. Post guys barely get touches in the NBA. So that's why until those guys can show that they can got ball handling abilities, can hit threes, and on either of those guys' cases play defense. The only way you make it as a college center to get to the NBA, think of Brook Lopez. Brook Lopez was one of him and his twin brother Robin Lopez. They're both 7-foot twins, right? And they can block shots, they can protect the rim, and they can shoot threes. They couldn't do that in college, but they developed into rim protecting 3-point shooters. That's what 7-footers do.
Exactly.
If you're a 6'9" back to the basket player, you're going to make a lot of money playing in Europe. You're going to make your money playing in Europe. Let me correct myself there.
Right, and both of the Lopez brothers were 7 foot.
Yeah. And they played. I remember. You might remember this, Scott. I'm sure you do. There was a game they played. Stanford played at JPJ and beat Virginia, a Dave Lato team, the one good Dave Lato team. They beat that Dave Lato team on a tip in by one of the Lopez brothers. I don't remember which one it was at the buzzer. One of the guys tipped in at the buzzer. They were both back to the basket 7-footers in college, who had to adapt in the NBA. The advantage they've got on guys like Timme and Bacot is they're 7 feet, not 6'9".
Right. And in the
And they
NBA,
play
that's a
defense.
big difference.
And they can play defense, whereas nobody will ever confuse, God love them, Drew Timmy or Armando Bacot for being defensive players.
No, they're not. So so the NIL is their bread and butter.
That's their bread and butter. And if we talked, Jerry and I talked with Lo Davis from Cavalier Futures. He's the former Virginia Athletics Foundation associate director, raised millions of dollars for Virginia Athletics over the last 12 years. Now he's working in NIL with Cavalier Futures. He said he got lots of texts from folks about London Johnson. And remember the London Johnson story, the April 1st commitment that wasn't. A 4-star point guard who wants NIL money. I mean, that's what we're told. I don't know that we've got that directly from London Johnson. We've got it from some people who claim to be close to him, that it's about NIL. Well, there's other 4-star point guards, and if it comes down to a bidding war, I don't know that Virginia needs to be in a bidding war, because the relative pittance that a guy like that is going to get from whoever ends up getting him to commit there versus what you can make if you are developed properly and play in the NBA is $50,000 or $75,000, maybe even $100,000 to play a couple of years somewhere else worth more than what Malcolm Brogdon and Joe Harris are making right now? I don't think so.
Yeah, I think it'll settle down. I really do. I'm not worried about it. I mean, I am concerned that it'll get out of hand, but I think it might get out of hand for a while, but eventually economics will take over.
Well, and one thing that both Lo Davis, when he talked with Jerry and I a couple of weeks ago, and then Carla Williams, when she talked to the media last week, she actually did answer a couple of questions on NIL. One thing they both agree on, and I think a lot of folks in college, the administration part of college athletics agree on this, it's going to take some regulation. Not the NCAA clearly is toothless, but we've only known that since the NCAA has been in existence. So that's not news. That's not breaking news. That's dog bites man, not man bites dog. Lo Davis suggested, and Carla agreed, that what this is going to take is congressional legislation. It's not even state by state, because right now there's nothing at the federal level saying here's what the rules should be. You have some states that have rules in place, you have others that don't, and really what that leaves is each school has to determine for itself how we're going to deal with NIL. And what that ends up leading to is now there are some institutions that are under investigation because the very flimsy rules the NCAA's put out are not being followed, and because there's no guidance. At some point soon, I think that the hard part of this is you can't get Republicans and Democrats in Congress to agree that today is Tuesday, but I think you will see eventually, hopefully sooner rather than later, that Congress will get involved and put some rules in place. And then everybody will have an equal footing. We'll all know what the rules are. And, the advantage of having something in terms of federal legislation over having the NCAA pass legislation is that federal legislation can lead to criminal sanction versus the NCAA getting mad at North Carolina and deciding to punish the heck out of the University of Northern Colorado. So that's something that I think has to happen. It should happen. Hopefully it does happen sooner rather than later.
And I hope so. I think it will. So I know we're running close. There are two things. In about a week, I'd like to come when we get together again. I'll talk to you a little bit about my experience at Fenway Park.
Okay.
Going up on next Friday, Saturday, and Sunday to see the Red Sox and the St. Louis Cardinals. And my Saturday ticket, Friday ticket, I'm about 8 rows behind the Red Sox dugout.
Okay.
And I'm only somewhat excited about that. My Saturday ticket is monster seats.
Monster seats. All right.
On top of the Green Monster, which were double what the price of the 8 rows behind third base dugout was. So I'm excited about, I'll report, take some pictures, and
we'll compare some notes there, Scott. You're freezing up a little bit there, but we'll compare some notes to me when Crystal and I sat behind home plate at the
Fenway Park
Nats games. And here's some breaking news, Scott, as we're wrapping
That's
up.
what a 12-game losing streak will do for you.
That's what a 12-game losing streak will do. I was just bringing up ESPN to actually look at the schedule for the games you're going to, and Angels firing Joe Madden. Wow, that's
They were 27-17, Chris.
And they only have the two best everyday players in baseball, and one of whom is also one of the best pitchers in baseball on the team. So
here's the thing about I was watching TV last night, watching a game last night, and they were talking about this. Madden was extremely successful in Tampa.
Yeah.
Working with a low budget.
With nothing, yeah.
With nothing, getting the most out of the players. He just had marginal success in Chicago, right? With the Cubs.
Was he there when they won the World Series?
Yeah, I think he was.
But then after the World Series year, yes.
After that, they really okay. But he did win a World Series, okay.
But then they declined quickly, so I'll give you that one. Yeah.
And he has with one of the highest payrolls in baseball.
Yeah.
With perhaps two of the greatest players, Steve Trout and Noah Syndergaard, and they've gone from 27-17. 1.5 games ahead of Houston.
No, I was
27-29.
Ohtani and Mike Trout.
And Syndergaard is pitching for them, right?
I wouldn't put him in the pantheon, but yeah, now I've got to watch. Let's see, at 9:38 they host the Red Sox tonight. MLB Extra Innings is my friend. I'm sure it's your friend, Scott.
Oh, absolutely.
It's almost like it's
like the red zone.
It's my drinking buddy.
Yeah.
It's my drinking buddy at night. After the wife falls asleep on the couch, I watch about 20 baseball games. But I will want to tune into the Angels broadcast to hear the scuttlebutt there. That will be interesting tonight.
Replaced him with Phil Nevin, who is a good, solid baseball guy.
This is the kind of thing. I mean, Madden is a guy that gosh, think about all the contributions to the game, the shifts. Moneyball, the Billy Bean approach with Moneyball, and then that was on the front office side. A lot, the shifts and the openers. The staff day approach to fleshing out your starting rotation. Those are Joe Madden inventions and innovations, I guess is a better word even too. But it doesn't, it worked at the level when you only had $25 million a year to spend on your whole team. He's got a couple $25 million players. And so you make this move, Scott, and we were both baseball guys. You make this move at this time. I mean, yeah, you're losing 12 games in a row, but you're replacing it with a guy on staff. I think what you're doing here is you're just trying to you're firing the head guy to shake up the clubhouse.
Yeah.
And that's a desperation move right there.
Yeah, that's a desperation move. And Houston is a solid team, but you don't have to win the division.
Right.
So they're still very much in the thick of the playoffs. So
got to be one of the top 7 in your league now because of all the extra wild cards. You just got to be one of you can probably be 81-81.
Hey, we forgot about the Anthony Rendon signing.
Oh, I didn't.
I didn't want to bring it up,
but he hasn't done anything there either.
He's done nothing really.
The Nats had a choice between Steven Strasburg and Anthony Rendon, and it turns out both would have been wrong.
So if you think it's a ho-hum Tuesday night, it's not.
No, breaking news as we wrap up the podcast. Well, a lot of college sports. We got some good criticism of ESPN there and some breaking news at the end. Scott, thanks for your time. For our listeners out there, thank you as well. And we will talk to you again soon.